Hey, in this video, we're going to be talking about China and Taiwan in the United States and potentially a disastrous mistake that I believe our administration is making by allowing something to happen that, in my opinion, is just really bad timing and bad form. And that's specifically based on the following chart. This chart right here suggests that there are three scenarios for inflation in 2023, and they are heavily impacted, and I'm falling off the screen there, by China. Take a look at these scenarios here. If China has a strong reopening and all of a sudden 1.4 million more Chinese start traveling and we see a lot more, that's sort of an estimate right now, and we get a lot more Chinese activity in the market, we could actually prop up inflation substantially. Inflation could stay between 5 and 6% in the United States. That's a problem because that means more aggressive Fed for longer, more pain. You get a disorderly COVID zero, like a disaster where they keep going on lockdowns, they keep things held down. You could actually bring inflation down to 2% in America. Or you stay at the baseline, we're around 3.5%. So I've said this before, but I believe that China will be an anchor for inflation for the world and for America. The longer they stay locked down, ironically, the more inflation comes down faster. But I'll tell you, if China reopens strongly and inflation pops up, and China gets pissed because of what you're about to hear in this video here, and we're not focusing on the things that could actually drive inflation down, we, in my opinion, are making a massive political mistake that could have massive economic consequences. And you're gonna understand a lot more about this when you combine this inflation chart that I just showed you and this sale that is about to take place, led by, of course, the Biden administration. Now look, I'm no politician, but I feel like I know negotiating, and I'll tell you, I think it is a bad time at a time when China is going to be pivotal to our economic success or failure in 2023, at a time when China is literally coming out of some of the worst protests they've had since Tiananmen Square, as the country is now calling for the resignation of Xi Jinping in frustration over COVID lockdowns, at a time where China's economy is probably in recession, even though the official numbers don't say they are, and at a time where lockdowns are so bad that countries, or well, not just countries, countries are upset at China, but companies are fleeing China. iPads are now going to get made in or assembled in India. iPhones might get assembled in Vietnam, where more than 80% of them were assembled by Foxconn China before that. Folks, this is probably the worst time, in my opinion, to be flashing in front of the Chinese that we are now selling 100 Lockheed Martin Patriot missiles to Taiwan. Now, in case you don't know, Patriot missiles were designed back in the 1980s to shoot down enemy airplanes. Today, they are used to shoot down enemy airplanes, but also to shoot down ballistic missiles and even the longer range intercontinental ballistic missiles. These are those big missiles that you see, the ballistic ones are the big missiles you see like North Korea, Iran, and China kind of scoot around on those large trucks and they stand next to them and they have those giant missiles on the big trucks. Well, those are slower moving missiles that can go very far. They can destroy things with pretty good precision, and they don't have to be nuclear, although they can be. They can destroy things like aircraft carriers, airports, weapons depots. They can cause a lot of freaking damage, and they can travel at different heights. In order to counterattack those, we use what are known as Patriot missiles. They drive around on trucks as well, and you kind of set them up in their own little depots. They come with 5 main parts. You've got the missile, you've got the launcher, which also happens to transport and aim, the missile and holds the missile. You've got a radar antenna. You've got an equipment truck. That's kind of where the staff goes into and aims the darn thing, or locks it on, that is, and the power plant. The Patriot missile doesn't have to actually be fired directly at an incoming enemy missile, and that makes it great and versatile for deploying very quickly. It sort of adjusts as it travels. But this thing can be locked onto ballistic missiles at a 50-mile range. You can't even see that far. And what's really incredible is these Patriot missiles are fast. They fly high and they could be twice as fast as ballistic missiles. These are really, really powerful missiles. And now we are selling 100 of them to Taiwan for, well, Lockheed Martin is, for $882 million. So these weapon systems will come with software upgrades, system upgrades for existing missiles, upgrading everything to the PAC-3 system, apparently. These are the most advanced missiles. These are what we in America use for surface-to-air missile defense, surface-to-aircraft defense, whatever. And this all is happening based on a 2010 arms deal that we agreed with for arms sales with Taiwan so that Taiwan could defend itself against China. Now, look, things relaxed after Biden met with Xi Jinping just a few weeks ago, and Biden said, look, there's no imminent invasion. China's not imminently invading Taiwan, even though tensions got pretty high there for a moment because of some of the things that Beijing said. But look, I think the last thing we ought to do is strengthen these tensions at this point when I think what's more important is we focus on trade. We should be focusing on trade and economies. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand the Taiwanese are looking to express their sovereignty, but at a time where there's no imminent sign of invasion, it seems a little insensitive while China is down to be negotiating this sale and publicizing it now. Just my take, but here's what else is happening in the face of China. In the face of China, Taiwan is currently trying to negotiate a trade agreement with the United States and hopes to sign a free trade agreement by November 2023. Now, the likes of that potentially happening maybe aren't that great given that we've got a split Congress, whether or not whatever happens in Georgia tomorrow ends up in the favor of Democrats or Republicans doesn't really matter. Donald Trump pulled us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership in 2016, said instead we would introduce bilateral trade agreements, and guess what kind of trade agreement we got with Taiwan? Well, we really didn't. Instead, Taiwan taxes our imports at a 5% value-added tax, and then of course there's a trade fee of a few basis points on top of that. There are luxury alcohol, port duty, and other taxes that can be as high as 10% on top of that. Things we import from Taiwan, like semiconductors, could receive a 6.34% baseline tax. And really, the problem here is that while everybody's trying to focus on getting inflation down and economies propped up, and China's in a really weak place, I a little bit feel like this arms deal is a middle finger to China. Now, I think we could probably cause more damage, and I'm not an expert on this, okay? I understand there are reasons for, military protection, although the United States can kind of provide that without necessarily selling it, right? But I think, my personal opinion, right now, the focus of our presidential administration should be how can we work with China and Taiwan to relax trade tensions so that way we can reduce inflation. Taxes create a deadweight loss on the economy. Taxes right now appear to be a higher issue, and inflation appears to be a higher issue to the lives of ordinary Chinese, Taiwanese, and Americans, and people around the world than, quite frankly, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Then again, of course, we've got Rocket Man over in North Korea going a little lulu, launching the most missiles he's ever launched in a single year to date thus far, which is not great. But the reality here is, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of hearing about almost $1 billion of missiles being sold to Taiwan, when I think there are other things we should be focused on right now. That's just my take. Again, I'm not a politician, but a little bit frustrated by this. Let me know what you think in the comments down below.